the most classic example for discussion is the post-match analysis studio. لما الناس بتقعد في الاستوديو مش بيقولوا ان هم انا جبت 3 تجوان، الفريق بتاعي جاب 3 تجوان، والفريق المره اللي فاتت جبنا جونين وده هيجيب 4 تجوان. هو ما بيقول كده، هو بيقول انا جبت 3 تجوان لان انا في الاغلب الفريق بتاعي كان في البرفورمانس، كان بيرفورما كويس، ودول كانوا متدربين وما كانش عندي اصابات وما كانش عندي طلب. if we are trying to make a discussion we have to be professional. لازم نتكلم كفنيين يا كابتن مدحت عشان نقدر نوصل ل fruitful discussion. To get this fruitful discussion there is a 6 component to be fulfilled. احنا اتفقنا ان في framework or skeleton to follow. This skeleton, the most appropriate skeleton is this one. Statement of the principal finding in the first of the discussion. Then strengths and weaknesses of this study. Strengths and weakness in relation to other studies. Meanings of the study, possible mechanisms that lead to this result, implications for the clinicians and policymakers, then the unanswered questions, and future research, and finally the conclusion. The principal finding is you have to start with a sentence that clearly demonstrates that you have something new in your paper. Reviewers, journal editors usually presume that the paper does not add anything new. So the classic starting of a discussion by writing up some basic information, like in this scenario, I asked permission from Dr. Muhammad Osman about his recent manuscript. We take some parts, the good parts, the bad parts I write it myself. So the bad parts here, that to start the discussion was talks about spontaneous pneumothorax is a common emergency. This part should be where? In the introduction, exactly, to the introduction. So when I start a good discussion, I start as he mentioned in his manuscript. This study investigates 120 patients. There was blah blah blah, and then we divided into 2 groups. And the early duration post-operative drainage is statistically significant higher in this. So I mentioned that I have something new in this study. You cannot ignore it. So after this, I have to emphasize the strengths and weakness in this study, and we have to do this. Don't let the reader discover your weakness. You have to mention this weakness, even in sometimes you have the subheading of a limitation of the study to show that you have mentioned this. So in a bad scenario, you will say, to best of our knowledge, there is only one previous study demonstrating this technique. It is only one, but I did not mention the weakness. And even the strengths, I did not mention where is the exact strength. If there is a one paper before, so what is the prevalence of this one? What is the significance of this one? In a good example, I would say that to best of our knowledge, there is only one previous study investigating this, and with the less patient cohorts than the current study. So I mentioned again that this study is containing something new. And then I said that our study did not include a post-operative follow-up CT scans, but still we have a low recurrence rate on a follow-up chest X-ray. So again, we are trying to demonstrate the strengths and the weakness. You have to bring the all evidence behind the argument, with or against, and should be considered. Discuss the opposed point of view, avoid ignoring studies with a similar result. In a bad section, in a bad discussion section, you will say that Mu et al. In 2019, the duration was like this. Puri et al. Have a meaning hospital stay of like that, and the other one is having an experimental group having a less cost effectiveness like this group. So you did not mention your result. You did not argue why this result looked like that. But in a good discussion section, you will say that the mean of hospital stay in our study was 4.2 and 3.8, and this was in line with the current publication of Mu, where his mean hospital stay was like this, and Puri, when his mean operative time is like this, and despite the fact that both studies include only primary spontaneous pneumothorax, we have about 1/3 of our patients having a secondary spontaneous pneumothorax with a longer hospital stay. So this is analysis, not just mentioning that those was numbers like us without looking in depth on the other studies. Another point here is to critically evaluate other papers' methodology, finding and conclusions, not only the abstract of the other papers. Don't get a mainframe or just a hospital stay of him is like us and this is okay. You have to differentiate in result should be discussed and possible explanation offers, and you should say what the study say and what the study does not say. Like for example, in a bad example, we said that the result in an agreement with the study of Mo, and they operate 62 patients with primary spontaneous pneumothorax divided into 2 groups, and there was no statistically significant difference between the both groups. This means that the demography in both groups are the same, but on the same time we did not demonstrate what this means, what this actually means. In a good example, we have to stress that Mo et al. Is operating about 66, and all of them are primary spontaneous pneumothorax. Mo et al. Refer to the technique as hand ligation because it grasps the bulla out of the board and ligate it on the base, while we use a totally endoscopic procedure. So this will not, you will not know this information from the abstract. You will know this from the full text, from investigating the figures in his paper and see how he performed his operation. So you have to look in depth on the papers that you will take it as a reference for your discussion section. The meaning of the study, and you have to postulate a possible mechanism impaction on the clinician and policymaker. Do not move beyond the limits evidence provided by the study and emphasize what the results say and what the results do not mean. In a bad example, I will conclude or finalize my discussion by that the current study showed that the operative duration, intraoperative bleeding is statistically significantly higher on those groups, VATS which was performed in this number of patients in comparison to none of them operated by ligation. In a good discussion, I would say that those findings are statistically significant, and this could be attributed, this is my opinion, this is my personal opinion, this could be attributed that cartilage vestibular may involve more lung tissue, so there is a more early pleurectomy is done in those cases, and not either what is the reason we do this, but we try to postulate why the results is looking like that. If you don't know, you just state that you cannot have an explanation, but you have to state it. This left us with the unanswered question, and unanswered question should be the new research, maybe proposed to provide the answer for questions that are still not answered, and you have to be specific. In a bad example, we said that experimental clinical experience on bilateral endoscopy will conclude this, and this technique is advocated as the method of choice, regardless of what anything else can be done. In a good example, we will say that this, although this technique of ligation is emerging as an affordable approach than endoscopic stapler, yet the potential disadvantage of this technique in long-term outcome is not known. So I state what I have. I have an early outcome. I don't have a late outcome for those patients. So this is a future research point for the others coming after me. The conclusion, and they state that the body of a good paper is Sander plot in reverse, bat or rat. It begins with Sander introduction and ends with liking. Avoid unqualified statement to conclusion not completely supported by the data. A bad conclusion would be like treatment of spontaneous pneumothorax without mentioning its primary or secondary. By ligation of polyvascular is more effective without mentioning at what level it would be effective. But in a good one, we will say that the treatment of a spontaneous pneumothorax by ligation of a body by cell suture is comparable to a vasculectomy in short-term result, offering less complication, better economic result. Nevertheless, the experience of the method is limited to the short-term outcome. It's important that further research confirm benefits of this technique in long-term result. So this should be the way that we deal with this discussion. In a hurry, I will talk about the tips and tricks for manuscript writing, especially the discussion. Before you start, you have to find, first, this is an advocation. Try to Google or YouTube using the Microsoft Word to write down your thesis or research. There is a specific ways to write down a book or a big manuscript on a Word. This by subheading and divide it into sections. الشكل المعروف عندنا دايما ان الناس بتعمل كل شابتر او كل حته في البتاع لوحدها في ملف وورد، ويجي بعد كده يحط الريفرنس، بص لا الدنيا كلها محكوكه في بعض. فالافضل انت تتعلم من الاول تشتغل صح. هياخد منك 6-7 ساعات تتفرج على شويه فيديوز لكن هيساعدك كتير. Do not forget to keep a copy on the cloud. Use it Google Drive, OneDrive, iCloud. Just do not put it on just one computer. If the system crashed, you lost all your data. Learn to use a reference manager program, ودي very good point to invest in. الريفرنس مانجر بيساعدك كتير ان انت تقدر تطلع الشغل ده، تغير شكل الريفرنس لو انت احتجت ان انت تغير الجورنال اللي انت هتبعته، الريفرنس ستايل اللي هم بيختاروه. End note is it's a paid program, لكن ال end note online is available through the Egyptian Knowledge Bank for free, and Mindly is totally free for everyone. Organization, you have to make the skeleton, as I said, or outline to describe what you want from this discussion to look like. Decide the objective you want to address. Think about the reader. لازم تفكر اللي هيقرا الارتكل بتاعك هيستفاد ايه؟ هيطلع بايه؟ ايه النقط اللي المفروض ان هو يشوفها هو ما كانش شايفها؟ فدي نقط لازم تاخد بالك منها. Decide what reference you will need to have in hand. ودي نقطة مهمة، احنا واحنا بنجهز المانuscript بندور ايه البيبرز اللي شبه الحاجه اللي احنا شغالين عليها وبنجمعها، ناخد الفول تكست بتاعها ونقراه، والمفروض ان احنا بعد ما نقراه نشوف الكومنتس، يعني ايه اللي طلع، ايه اهم نقط هنا. البيبر دي فيها عدد اكبر من الكوهورت، البيبر دي فيها مشاكل، البيبر دي بروسبكتيف، البيبر دي ريتروسبكتيف. You should write, you should be written your comment and attach to every article. لو انت بتشتغل بيبر ورك فالمفروض انت تاخد البيبر وتطبعها وتعمل ورقه جنبها او عليها وتعلم على النقط اللي انت عاوزها فيها. لو انت بتشتغل على PDF اعملها as a comment on a PDF file. Now you are ready to start? Okay. You have to have a timetable. كلنا ما بنشتغلش الا لما يبقى ورانا ديدلاين، احنا مش هنضحك على بعض. فانت لو انت if you advise your if you have a meeting with your advisor and you said that you will deliver the first draft chapter on Wednesday, you will focus all your attention to finish it. So try to have a timetable before you start. I told that this is the curse of a word final. دايما الناس اللي بيجي يعمل بحث يقول لك ايه final my thesis وده عادة it's never final. The scientific word is never final. So don't use the word final. The building point in each discussion or any research is the paragraph. How to write a paragraph? It's simple. الباراجراف حجمه قد ايه؟ قد كده ولا مقيسه بالشبر كده ولا يبقى نص الصفحه؟ الباراجراف it's the topic sentence with a supporting fact. فلو احنا قلنا facts is an emerging technique to as a minimally invasive, so the supporting fact will be like Roku started by Uniportal في 2004 وبعدين دييجو do a Uniportal vaccinated في 2013 وهكذا. دول supporting facts. So لما تحب تعمل ما تحاولش تكتب statement one word وتحملها paragraph. It's a paragraph with one statement, topic, sentence and supporting facts. For speed writing, this is I discovered this one and I work with me the 4 draft technique. لو انت عاوز تكتب discussion عاوز تعرف تكتبها ازاي، اسهل طريقه تكتبها بيها the 4 draft technique. ازاي؟ draft 1 ان انت تعمل outline. ايه يعني اعمل سكيلتون؟ انا هتكلم في الدسكشن دي اهم نقط عندي الهوسبيتال ستاي، البليدنج، الايرلي، النقط الاساسيه، دول ال4 حاجات اللي انا هتكلم عليها. draft 2 is a brainstorming. انا هجمع كل الحاجات وكل السورس وكل البيبرز اللي بتتكلم على النقط بتاعت الايرلي ديوريشن في الحته دي، وهجمع دول في الحته دي، وهجمع دول في الحته دي، اجمع كل الحاجات، احط كل الحاجات، ما اهتمش بجرامر، في سبيلنج، ببنكتويشن، انا بجمع الحاجات على الملف وبحطها وبستنى عليها. Draft 3 is sifting or sorting. التصنيف بقى اللي هو هنبتدي بقى نعمل paragraphs. وهنا the stage 3 is where the first seeds of paragraphs germinate, grow and flourish. هنعمل ايه؟ هبتدي اجمع انا الايرلي هنا. فالستيتمنت الاولاني او التوبيك سنتنس and the early duration is an important fact. هجيب تحتها النقط، فمو ايتال قال كذا وحسين قال كذا ودكتور عمرو قال كذا ودكتور هاني قال كذا. Those papers is arrangement was كذا و not arrangement was كذا. دول الدرافت of sorting. After we do this, the draft 4 is the preening draft. الصنفرة، الوش الأخير بتاع الحاجة، إن أنت تمسك الحاجة تقراها، تشيل الجمل المشتركة، تعمل الجرامر، تعمل البنكتويشن، فده يطلع لك الشكل النهائي بتاع المانuscript زي ما انت تحب. The style, the text must be clear with grammar. It should be written easy to read. Avoid some phrases like at this point of time. ساعات ناس بتكتب كده عشان يبان ان هو كاتب كتير. هي it is now. فuse a simple wording. مشكله المشاكل دايما في الدسكشن اللي بتظهر البليجرزم، ان انت واخد حاجات كتيره من اماكن ثانيه والكلام شكله احسن برنامج فور فري بليجرزم، ده حاجه مهمه خالص انتبهوا لها. اسهل برنامج begin the writing process by starting by your idea and then go back to the author's original work. Do not copy and paste. Even if you paraphrase, most of the new plagiarism check will discover this. The best program, and it's free, is to write by your own and then return to the author's original work and take small phrases or or rephrase it, the phrase, the sentence itself. Peer reading صعب جدا ان البيبر تبقى اول مره تتقري يبقى من الادفايزر بتاعك او من المنتور بتاعك او من الجورنال اديتور. دايما حاول تستخدم حد من زمايلك اقرا دي. ليه؟ لان انت لما بتبص للحاجه بتبقى اندبس فيها ساعات بتفقد النقط الاساسيه، فهو لما يقراها ممكن ياخد باله ان في حته مش مفهومه. فدايما حاول تخلي حد تاني يقرا الشغل بتاعك قبل ما تبعته. Beginning the real work, do not be upset if your manuscript, especially the first one, return covered in red ink او major revision لو انت بتبعت للمجله. ده طبيعي سواء الادفايزر او الجورنال اديتور wants the manuscript to be as good as possible لان هو his or her reputation as well as yours is affected. The journal editor هو بيكسبكت ان هو يطلع بايه من البيبر بتاعتك او عاوز يشوف ايه منك، عاوز يشوف ان انت identify a wordful problem or question that has not been previously answered. You have solved the problem or answered the question, at least contributing some fact for better understanding of the topic selected. فدايما ده يبقى in mind وانا بكتب ان انا عاوز اوريه ان في حاجه جديده. لو انا فشلت في ان انا اطلع له دي ففي الاغلب هو مش هيقبل الشغل. وبشكركم وبدعوكم ان انتم تبعتوا المانuscript الجايه لكارديوثوراسيك سيرجن جورنال وان شاء الله الدكتور حسون هيقبلها يعني.
Any questions?